Did you know that there is a polite way and a not so polite, rude way to clink glasses in some cultures when you toast? Are you curious about great pairings for truffles and caviar? And why have Instagram and TikTok really exploded in popularity in terms of a way of learning about wine? Well, our guest is going to share tips and stories answering those questions and more. But before I get to introducing him fully, I just want to say that if you're watching this video live, please, in the comments, type where you're logging in from, what's in your glass. I want to hear from you, and I'll be in those comments as well. If you're watching the video replay, I also want to hear from you. Please go ahead and let me know what's the weather like, where are you? This is a conversation that was recorded for my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. I'm Natalie McLean, and I host online wine and food pairing courses. And you've just joined one of the most passionate groups of wine lovers who gather every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to talk to the most interesting people in the world of wine, like our guest. All right. So, Dr. Clinton Lee is the executive director of the Asian Pacific Wine and Spirit Institute, a WSET diploma graduate and wine educator and speaker. He is the author of Master the Art of Manners, which will be published later this year, and we're going to talk about that. He is also an internationally recognized intercultural etiquette expert, wine and spirit educator, and judge. Dr. Lee has been featured in the media around the world and is recognized as a social media influencer with over 2 million followers on various platforms, which is just incredible. He is also the host of the Wine Buzz podcast, and he joins us now from his home in Vancouver. Welcome, Dr. Lee. It's so great to have you here with us.
Well, thank you very much for that very gracious introduction, Natalie. It's my pleasure to be on your show.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to be watching my P's and Q's because you are a manners etiquette expert. But let's dive into some of your more memorable wine moments, Dr. Lee. Let's start with, tell us about the time you were in Argentina, consulting there with Argentinian winemakers. Did something get lost in translation on that trip?
That was a unique trip. I have a friend who owns a winery there, and he was very interested in blending and producing his wine in a rather specific way so that the taste, mouthfeel, body would be more suited to the Asian market, because that was a particular market that he wanted to break into. So he invited me to go there, and he said, would you mind coming out, and I will take care of you, and you will meet all my very experienced winemakers, and let's get together. So I did, and it was one of my memorable trips, I have to tell you, because it was a very long trip. I think the only other trip that I've had of such length would have been trips to Singapore. Now, so I traveled to Toronto to Chile, Santiago, and which was quite a lovely trip, but it's quite lengthy. And then from there, across the Andes and into Mendoza. Mendoza Airport is quite unique because I've been to many, many airports. But with the Mendoza Airport, as soon as you walk out into the public area, there's a vineyard right by the airport.
Right.
It really blends in. You feel, wow, I'm in wine country.
Huh.
Then I had to go through the 5-hour ordeal of traveling by car immediately after this very long circuitous air travel to General Alvear, which is probably in the southeast from Mendoza. And after that trip, it was quite an ordeal. And the next day, I was meeting with with the winemakers. Unfortunately, their English was not as good as my friend had thought that it would be, and we had to make do with signs and writing symbols and formula, which worked out well. I have to say it was challenging, but we're all at the very heart of it, winemakers, and we wanted to produce a wine that we were all very proud of. So we went through a systematic method. And I guess I would really like to let the viewers know that you can communicate in many different ways. And certainly with winemakers, my experience has been you pick up on their nuances, you pick up on the palates, you find a way to communicate. And that's what all the culture and the sharing of communication is about. So luckily, I do speak some Spanish. I had taken Latin. I'd studied Latin for about 5 years, 6 years. And as a young schoolboy, we would be speaking in Latin for 40 minutes. There was no English allowed to be spoken, just pure Latin.
Wow.
So that helped me in good stead. And having studied French and from my late mother's side, Portuguese, I was able to decipher and put things together. So it wasn't all as calamitous as it sounds.
That's great. How were you able to communicate about more complex elements of the wine, like tannin structure or whatever? How do you draw that as a diagram or make sign language to communicate some of those kinds of concepts?
Well, as you use the appropriate word, you draw pictures.
Okay.
And, when you're trying the wine, you sort of indicate if it's highly tannic, you use your tongue and you indicate dry, and you use your hand to sort of indicate for a smooth as opposed to rough. Definitely there's many different ways. And eventually there's always the dictionary.
Sure.
And,
sure.
Because there was no internet availability, because it's rather sporadic out in that particular part of Argentina.
That's true. You could have used Google Translate had it been available.
That's right.
But wow, the challenges. Well, I remember going to Bordeaux back in the day before cars had navigation systems. And my French was weak, and I'm driving in. It's crazy rush hour traffic, and I'm trying to get, out of Paris and off to Bordeaux. Anyway, that was an adventure I'll never forget. I think I tasted some good wines, but I'm not sure. Anyway.
I'm sure you've got many great stories, Natalie.
Sure. I think we all do, especially when it comes to wine. Every bottle has a story. And storytelling, I know, is one of your, is close to your heart. So let's go to another story, shall we, Dr. Lee? How about the time when you were part of a blind wine tasting in China? What happened there?
This was really at the really early part of the wine renaissance in China. Hong Kong had just allowed wines to be imported into the port of Hong Kong, because, as you know, Hong Kong is one of the major and strategic ports in the world. And they had just decided to remove all of the import duties of wine into Hong Kong. So now it was this huge open reservoir where importers were bringing in the copious amounts of wine. And China at this point had this voracious appetite for wanting to try and taste, understand, appreciate wine in all its magnificence. So I was invited several times, and one of the experiences that I had was, let's go to a blind tasting. And, all right, that's wonderful. Now, here in the Western world, and certainly in Europe and many other places, blind tasting to us is where the wine is poured for you, and it might come in this form, where that's all you see. and from the particular glass, you have to try and look at the color and make your estimation, and then from the nose and then on the palate. And that is the definition of blind tasting. But as I said, this was the very beginning of a culture that they never really went into blind tasting. So when I went into present, their blind tasting was they would have a napkin, or they would literally blindfold themselves.
Oh, put on blindfolds as opposed to just blinding the identity of the bottle. Wow.
Yeah, and that's what they did. I thought, my goodness, that's taking it to a new level. Now, it was, but it's just a different approach. But having said that, going back to China several times, it's quite different now. And they've produced some exceptionally talented individuals, groups, and the entire wine culture there has changed. So you don't find these sort of blind tastings defined as I have given through this example, but now more of an international level. And I'm very pleased to say that exceptionally high levels of expertise and skills are being displayed both in the tastings and in the production of wine.
Fascinating, yeah. Well, I have to admit, I once thought that's what blind tasting meant too, like blindfold and maybe some other paraphernalia that I let my imagination go. But
well,
I'll
you're
keep
right,
it here.
Natalie. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, for a non-English speaker, when you mention blind, they immediately would say, oh, the opticals are removed.
Sure.
You are literally blind.
Yes. Let's take it back to France. You had an interesting dinner at the restaurant Auray, the Ducasse de Château de la Palais de Versailles. What happened there?
Well, you mentioned earlier on that I have a very strong following on social media, and I'm very grateful to all of my supporters out there. And it's not uncommon for me to be recognized. Oftentimes when I'm out at a restaurant, or perhaps I'm going through the wine store, or people recognize me. So I was visiting the Palace of Versailles last year, and I came across the restaurant that you mentioned, and I thought, well, yes, it's impolite to pass a restaurant like this and not visit and have a meal, which I then proceeded to go up the elevator, make a reservation, and went back when my time was due. And I walked in, and it was very interesting because, the Ducasse name is very prominent in the culinary world.
Mm-hmm.
And how they set their plating, it's a very French style.
Mm-hmm.
And the waitress, my server, and the manager, they recognized me.
Wow.
And immediately, they were very hospitable, and I'm sure they're hospitable to all their guests, but they certainly made me feel rather special. And for me, it was very warm, very heartwarming to know that when we record, like yourself, we record and we have an audience around the world, that we are making that positive difference of nurturing culture and etiquette and manners, and it goes across all the continents. So for me, it just had that very, very special meaning. And I'd recommend for people who do visit Palace of Versailles, go to the restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Sounds marvelous. I mean, just even the name alone sounds fancy and splendid and a feast for the senses. One story brings out another. I remember being in a restaurant once, and I used to call my website and newsletter Nat Decants, as in Natalie Decants. Okay. And so the server came up to me and she said, "Are you Nat Decants?" I just thought that was funny, as opposed to my name. But anyway, yeah, you do it is, I guess, I don't know if you ever feel this way, Dr. Lee, but, as a creator sometimes, and if you're creating from your computer and you're not in front of a live audience, it feels sometimes unusual when people do recognize you because, I don't know, you're kind of on your own creating this content, but there fortunately are real people out there connecting with you through it. But it always surprises me getting recognized. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, Natalie, you have a very distinctive voice and look, and I think many people would be very happy to link with you, whether it's impromptu, chance meeting. What I found was very unusual. I was booking my seat at the airport, and this was the time when there were still restrictions. You had to wear a mask, which I was wearing, and the airline attendant said, "Are you the gentleman who makes those wine videos?" And I looked back and I said, "But how did you recognize me? I have a mask." And the gentleman said, "Well, it's your eyes, and I recognize your voice."
Wow.
Yes.
Right.
So I think our fans are, they take in all the details, which perhaps you and I as content creators, we take for granted, but they certainly do, and we're very grateful for that.
Absolutely. I love the connection, the deeper connection you can have as well, like through books and the podcast, and certainly you've developed it on social media. The flip side is you always do need to be on your best behavior. Not that we wouldn't, but when you know people can recognize you, it's like, okay, better watch everything.
That's very true. That is very true. I mean, it is part of our normal demeanor when we are in public, how we behave. But you're absolutely right. You'd add that little extra just in case. Yes.
That public accountability. Yes. All right. So in addition to wine and spirits, we've already mentioned that you focus on manners. So tell us about the art of decorum at dinner in Verona, Italy, please.
Yes. I was attending the Vin Italy event, and as you know, you have all the best wine producers from Italy attending, and the Italians are well known, in fact renowned, for their dress code, their impeccable manners, and certainly when you are enveloped in a wine environment, they are very particular as to how you behave. It was a tasting, actually, as opposed to a dinner, and I was observing, you would see this line of Italian sommeliers who would be wearing, their badge of honor and wearing their black and white, easily recognized sommelier uniform, I would call it, and there was this whole row of them within this very old princely royal home. And you had all the guests there. And what I noticed, the one experience was how they would pour for you. And when you go to wine tasting events, you will get the guest coming in front of the pourer, and as soon as the wine is poured, you hope, but it doesn't always happen, where the person who's received the wine will then gently glide away to the side, allowing the other guests to receive their pouring of the wine. They don't.
Right.
They will tend to just stand in front there and try and have a few words. In the meantime, this entire list and length and queue of guests who want to also receive some of the pouring is getting longer and longer.
That's true.
Yet, in Italy, they are very, very, certainly at this particular tasting, they were very cautious. They were very aware of protocol, and the line was very smooth.
So they kept stepping aside.
Stepping aside.
How gracious. Yes.
Yeah.
I remember the old days pre-COVID where wine shows, there'd be a big clump of people at each table when they had booths. And it was hard to get in there. You kind of had to jump around in the back and say, hello. It felt like a bar scene.
I think for many of the viewers today, if you are attending a wine tasting, because these days most tastings are divided into trade and into public.
Yes.
And whichever way you might begin as a member of the public, but then into the trade, it's always good etiquette and sound practice to receive your pouring of wine, slide away seamlessly to the side, allow others to receive it, and you can make your assessment. And if you really want to ask questions, you can go back. But even then, it's very, very difficult. There's so many people, the activity, the noise. Just get the card and contact the wine company or whoever it is that's responsible and connect with them later.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to be shouting above the crowd and the excitement. And I'm sure you've had that, Natalie.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I love that idea of get the contact card and, follow up that way. It reminds me of bringing flowers to a guest for a dinner party, which is lovely, but I think it's even better if you can arrange to have them delivered the day before, the day of, and then they have the time to put them in a vase or whatever, as opposed to trying to greet all the guests at the same time and put your flowers in a vase. And maybe that's too fussy, but I do like that approach.
Not at all, Natalie. I can see you are a lady of elegance, because that is precisely what one should be doing, in advance. Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Elegance and high maintenance, both.
I don't know.
So which came first for you, Dr. Lee, your interest in manners and etiquette and decorum, or wine?
I would say they came across rather simultaneously,
Okay.
in the sense that I had a rather stern education. I had a Jesuit education. So, as you know, they are the champions of when it comes to bringing out the best in an individual. They're uncompromising in what they expect, and there's a very famous saying that the Jesuits have: give me a child at 7 and I'll return you back a man.
Yes.
So
it's quite daunting.
the education is well known, and it was during that time that the formative years of my education, where manners was deeply, deeply, I wouldn't say pounded, but certainly very fiercely ground, and you had to imbibe on this culture of being gracious, understanding, being courteous to others, and this has propelled and continued through the years. And when I traveled, I would then take in all the different cultures of the different countries that I visited, and I truly consider myself blessed that I've traveled to over 100 countries.
Wow.
Both for work and for pleasure, and on all continents, except Antarctica and Arctic, but all the other continents I've been to, and visited individuals, groups from different spheres of life, from royalty to nobility to the average person in society, and every single individual has something to offer. So this was all being accumulated as a single strand within my own personal life's tapestry, as it were. And wine, of course, became involved in that, because you're eating and you're drinking, and certainly when you're in Europe. And then when I added on my studies, I have a proclivity to punish myself, and one of those is through education. I just love learning all the time. So I'd literally say for years and decades, I've written an exam of one sort or another. It's gone from you know, the jewelry business and undertaking the GIA exams and diamonds and all the way right through. So like you, I have a financial background. So there's this plethora of knowledge that I possess. And yet, as you know, if you're in the finance world, there's a certain manner in which you behave. If you're in the jewelry business, there's another. If you're in a winery, so each one of these has that culture. So it's always there with us, really. And with the wine, enjoying it every day, taking all my wine courses and visiting the countries. So I would say that we're very closely intertwined as opposed to being, a singular on a graph, it's culture now and then wine and then culture
Right.
and then wine.
Right.
No.
That's
Yeah.
true. They always weave together, and especially if you had the Jesuit education, those being, as you said, the leaders in education among the various Catholic orders. Wine would have been part of that too, like the Mass, certainly. And
Yes.
it's just all through the Bible and the text, and so I'm sure you were introduced to wine very early if you were attending service as well.
Well, we had to learn the Our Father in Latin.
Wow. That is great. I almost wish I had had more Latin studies. And I just think getting at the root of language is a way of understanding it and enriching it.
Mhm.
But I guess it doesn't have much commercial value, so it doesn't seem to be part of the core curriculum anymore. But that's a side shoot.
But life is changing, life is continuously changing, and both from an individual and from a community, country. I see life in very similar to a vineyard. You have that period during the spring burst and the budding and the coming out, and then you get the lovely aroma of all the new grapes as they come out, in fact buds at that time, and then they mature during the summer, and then you see them ripen into like adults, and then they're ready to be plucked and
Yes.
picking, and then from there, and then there's a time of rest, and again, and if you apply that to our own individual lives,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same.
Absolutely.
Same with the society.
Rebirth.
Yeah.
Even not to get too religious, but Christ said, "I am the vine, and those who don't follow me, they'll be burnt like twigs, like the way they've prune a vineyard and burn the dead cane of the vines." But yeah, it all intersects. It all weaves together. It's amazing. And so, when it comes to manners, did you do any particular training, or was it through your extensive reading and travel that you came to be an expert on the subject?
A combination.
Okay.
Upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
having been brought up in a society where there were many different cultures integrated and yet separate. Formal studies. My doctorate is in cultural diversity and organizational behavior.
Okay.
So you had to learn about the different cultures, and in order to learn about a culture, you have to understand the way they think, the way they behave, how do they approach time, not wanting to make it too academic, but would they be perhaps monochronic, so, chronos for time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to consider, let's say, the Germans and Austrians, they prefer to do one task at a time, finish it, and move on to the next one.
Huh.
And they're very fastidious when it comes to time.
Mm-hmm.
They're on time. You expect them to finish at a certain time, and they don't disappoint.
That's
It's
true.
the way that that they have been brought up, it's their culture. Whereas you might find cultures that are monochronic, and they would be perhaps more the Latin American countries. You would perhaps, let's say, the Spanish, or the Peruvians, anyone that has that sort of Spanish influence, they multitask extremely well. And an example would be, I have a meeting with Natalie. Now, my time with Natalie is, let's say, 12 o'clock. But in the meantime, I have 5 different chores, and I'm going about them. And some of the chores I wanted to complete after my meeting with you, but it's more opportune for me to finish it now. So they'll quickly finish it. And then when I meet you an hour later, you perhaps are somewhat annoyed that I've wasted your time. But I'm saying, well, Natalie, you have the rest of me for the whole day.
Ah, right.
So it's just a different way of thinking.
Yes.
And it's part of, and from that's how you get etiquette developing.
Huh.
How
The
people
approach
behave.
to time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
love
time
that.
is one, thinking is one. Another one, so the question was, how did it all come? The experience of travel, the formative education, my formal studies, and of course, reading experience, as we all have a different sense, and we absorb, as we all do, situations and scenarios that we're in. I'll give you an example. The most sought-after office in a North American conglomerate is the corner office, right?
Right.
Why? Because that office represents the pinnacle of power. Because you make a decision, you're in the corner office, you are seen to be the beacon of success.
Mm-hmm.
Yet in certain cultures, certainly in the Far East, decisions are never made on a singular basis. They're made as a group consensus. So they will consider what is the topic, what is the decision to be made, and you will never find a singular answer being given to you at meetings. They will never say, I wouldn't say never, but they would tend to avoid saying no to you. They'd say, perhaps, could be, let's come back to this, and then they will then regroup and approach once more. So you've got a difference in decisions are made, the manner in which it is made, the approach to time. So when you put all of these together, you understand an individual's culture.
Yes.
And now, with with immigration reaching the heights that it has, and I mentioned this in my book, so you've got immigration, you've got industrialization, you've got globalization. So you've traveled extensively, Natalie,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say to the viewers out there, you can go to any major city in the world. You'll find a little Italy, a little India, a Chinatown, a Japanese area, or Korean. Unheard of 60 years ago.
Right.
But now you're having all these pockets. Why? Because immigration has literally skyrocketed, whether it's permanent or it's just working. And you have these communities. So within these communities, they will influence, perhaps not on a major scale, but certainly on a minor scale. Then you just only have to look at the stores. What are they selling?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like certainly before, if there's no need for what they call a certain ethnic background, if the minority is very small, you're not going to find the products and the produce that they would buy on a daily basis.
Sure.
So I would encourage, you asked me, where did it all come from? It's not so much where it all came from. It's what you do as we look forward all the time. How do you want to become more culturally aware? I'd say go to the supermarket. See what's on the what products they have. And if there's something you've never tried, try it.
Mm-hmm. True. Good advice when it comes to wine, too. Widen your palate and your cultural experience through the bottle. I'll never forget, your stories do remind me, my first wine trip, but it was before I became a wine writer. Mm-hmm. And it was a tour of different countries, Austria, Germany, but also into Italy, quite a bit into Italy. Our bus driver was German, and he was on time every morning. And if we got stuck especially at a winery in Italy, where they would like go on and keep serving more like pasta courses and wines, he'd be just fuming in the parking lot, kind of like looking at his clock. And I never saw the two cultural norms at loggerheads like I did with this. And he was just trying to do his job, but man, he did not understand their, monochromatic or chronistic approach to especially wine tastings, which went well over schedule. So it was a clash.
And it still happens today.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it does. Absolutely. So what do you think people misunderstand about manners and etiquette and in general, but then we'll narrow it down to wine etiquette and so on?
Through the social media that has been very popular, and I'm very thankful for the support that I've had, I do read, I would say, a very high percentage of all the comments. There are, of course, those, you get frivolous comments, and then you have more of the serious ones. But there is a common thread through most of them. And one of the themes that comes across is, it's old-fashioned. I want to drink any old way I want to drink. It's my wine, I paid for it, and I will drink it the way I want to. Well, that's perfectly fine in private, I would say. But when you're drinking wine is a very social activity. People enjoy it for the wine itself, what's inside the bottle, what that bottle represents. For someone who's born in 1985 and they are presented with a 1985 bottle, that's the year I was born, they would say. I remember. What happened that year? What was the weather like? It's a talking point, number one. And you could be swilling and drinking the wine in any manner you want, but perhaps, again, not everybody behaves in the same way. So even when you are toasting, I'll use an example. Mm-hmm. So I have two glasses here. This is person A, this is person B.
Right.
Person A is of a higher standing in the community or in business, and having respect hierarchical order is very important in the East. So when you are toasting, certainly with someone from the East, this is A, who's higher level, B, perhaps not of the same level. When you toast, this person, B, must never have their glass higher.
That'd be disrespectful.
It would be disrespectful, and it would be unintentional, but it would be recorded that you've caused this person to lose face in public.
Wow.
So you often see, this person will come, no, I think you should be, I respect you more, so they'll go down, and then this person will go
Keep
down.
Keep lowering the glasses.
And I've literally seen people on their knees now.
Doing this? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, at banquets. Yes. Yes. It's like the honor to have, the honor to pay for the bill.
Right.
They rush there, and you've seen people engage in fisticuffs to say, no,
really?
I've got to pay. Yes.
My goodness. Have you seen another sort of wine cultural or etiquette tip that you can share with us?
You mean in terms of toasting?
It could be toasting. It could be anything else related that we might not be aware of. Not so much, pour a third of the wine, a third glass level or whatever. But is there anything like that? Toasting is really interesting, the lowering of the glasses.
Yeah, the lowering of the glasses would be one. Another one I would say is if you happen to be involved with anyone from Korea,
Okay.
and after you've toasted,
Yeah.
and let's say I clearly I would want to give you more respect, Natalie. So instead of drinking it like that, I would use my one hand that's not holding the glass,
Okay.
turn away from you,
Oh.
and drink it so you don't see me drinking in
So
front
you'd
of you.
shield the glass for those who are
shield the
listening on the
glass
podcast. Yeah. Okay.
And I would turn my face away from you.
Huh. Okay. Would you do that
Yes.
with food as well?
No, just
Ju-
when you're drinking.
Just the wine. And why not with food, but with wine you do that? Do you know?
Well, it's I think it's rather impractical with food all the time.
Okay, sure.
Turning, but with wine, it's a lot easier.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
That's
so
a good
these are some of the customs that
Yeah.
you go through, and some customs, you would never pour your own wine. Certainly maybe in the Western world, would you like some more wine, Natalie? I would pour for you, and then I'd pour for myself. Certain countries, I would pour for you, meaning that I'm expecting you, I'm politely asking you to please pour the wine for me. 'Cause
Okay.
It's bad manners for me to pour my own wine.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Wow. I love that. So fascinating. Let's go back to social media, which we've touched
Sure.
on. You have a massive following. So how many followers do you have on like Instagram and TikTok?
Well, clearly it's over 2 million plus. We don't keep a count on it after
Okay.
we hit the 2 million plus.
That's
we
amazing.
focus on the content. We
Sure.
focus on what the audience is looking for, and whatever questions that they pose to us, we make great and concerted effort to answer them. And we do get a long list of videos that they would like. And
Oh, really? So they're always
Yeah.
interacting with you, asking questions, and that's the basis for your content, answering their questions?
it's part of.
Okay.
It's part of, and there's certain themes. I like to keep the content fresh, like what's happening in the world. What are we looking at, and also the audience.
Okay.
It's very important, and one of those aspects is the one sector that of our followers, they are not familiar with certain cultures or etiquette. And in my book, for my research, there were certain factors that I attribute to this difference in thinking. And I would ask the viewers and also the listeners, next time you're in a situation, bear for a minute or even a few seconds. There are 8 billion people living on this planet. There are 7 generations living together for the first time
Wow.
at the same time. We individually represent 0.90125.
Is that we as in
That's-
Canadians?
No, as an individual.
Oh, as an individual. Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, as an individual.
Okay.
North America, that's USA, Canada, we only represent 5% of the world's population.
Wow. Yeah.
5%. If you look at demographics for the next 10 years, the influx of Asian, African, Latin American will be in excess of 85% of the world's population. So
Great.
it's not practical. It's not practical to expect everyone will follow the 5% population,
It's true.
especially with globalization. When you're traveling, you need to be aware of, for business and personal, how do they behave? How do they eat? Not everyone's going to shake your hands. Some will bow. Some will put their hands together, like in Thailand or in India. They would say, namaste, kapun ka. or they will bow like in Japan. And do you have your hands by your side or in front of you? All these things come into play. So you need to deal with generational. Now, generational, they will, like the millennials, the Gen X, the Gen Z. This instrument,
I'm looking at that. The phone, the smartphone,
the phone,
yes.
that has changed the
Right.
entire thinking and format
It has.
of how people behave, because they can, at snap of the fingers, they can get information about literally anyone, anything, in a flash and a blur that wasn't available before.
It's true.
So generational change, you have, depending who you interact, and this is my advice, depending who you interact with, just be aware that if they are belonging to an older generation, every day they are seeing the world that they grew up in disappearing. They fear what's happening in the future. You think about ChatGPT, you
Sure.
think about AI. Just Facebook for some people is very difficult.
Yes.
And yet, for the younger generation, this was their umbilical cord. They've known nothing except to have that.
Yes. That's true.
So I think if you understand the generation, then you understand effects of the immigration, and then the technology, you are now starting to appreciate how etiquette has changed, not only through geographical, but also through generational.
And so how are you appealing to multi-generations on TikTok and Instagram? Because you must be, with the kind of followership you have. Are you gearing certain videos for Gen Z and others are for baby boomers? I mean, how are you doing that?
As I said, it's the followers, and I like to see the content that we produce with my entire team is one of being a bridge. We're the bridge to create the understanding of what the younger generation, and let's say the boomers, what do the boomers expect? Because you're going to have to deal with them for at least another 10, 20 years. And
Sure.
the younger generation, you are setting the new parameters for yourself. So I always say to the viewers and listeners, your time will come. Life is a circle. You're young now, you'll become adults, and you will grow old. So how you treat the elderly now will be how you will be treated when you become older. So the content is there as a conduit, as a bridge, as a channel, so that both generations, all people have a way to realize, oh, this is how I grew up. Now I understand why they do this in this particular country, or why did that generation do that? You see, it's very different.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And what have been the three most interesting or posts or videos that you've done that have elicited the most feedback and response, the most popular topics when it comes to wine?
Oh, to wine.
Yes.
To wine. I think one of the things that I don't do is I don't pick up a bottle of wine and I will say I'll share my views. This particular, you can share the facts for sure. Let's say this is a bottle of wine from Italy. The grape is XYZ. It was made with oak. There's a vanilla taste. There's a hint of coconut. So perhaps it's American oak that they used. As wine professionals, there's certain markers and identifiers that we know about. I find that you have to reach a certain level to truly appreciate that.
Sure.
So in terms of the wine that I found was the order. Everything in life has an order.
Okay.
So, it's a very clearly comical example, but as men, if we're going to shave, we don't dry shave and then put it on the shaving foam after.
Sure.
Right, you put the shaving foam, then you would shave, and then maybe you put aftershave. There's a certain methodology. So when you're tasting wine, you're not going to taste sweet wine first,
Sure.
and then go to red wine, and then bubbly, and then go to white wine.
Right.
So I think that was one of the more popular videos where I suggested, you have light before full-bodied wines, you have white before red wines, you have dry before sweet, and those, and I always suggest going from left to right, because most flights are created, as we know as professionals. You have your lightest wine and your driest wine, always starting from the left, and wine flights generally start from left to right.
Sure. Because you always want to drink up sensorially.
Yeah, so that was video relating to wine. But if you're talking about etiquette, I think the one would be the one about how to eat your bread at a lunch or a dinner.
Okay.
If you're given you often get the complimentary bread with the butter,
Yes.
and how would you eat the bread?
And?
So, that one garnished, I think, 14 million views.
Oh my goodness.
It was
Wow.
reported from Australia to New Zealand to Scotland, England, South Africa, and one of the headlines said, "Etiquette master has been." Lets you know that you've been eating your bread incorrectly all these years.
Doing it all wrong.
Doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
And I say to you, if you want to eat your bread in a certain way, do so. But just be aware that others may not, and it may give them a different impression of you. And if you couldn't care less how they think about you, then that's up to you. But in the majority of cases, people do care.
And how should we eat it?
Well, if you go to my video and social media collection, you'll be able to see. But you would take the piece of bread, put it onto your plate, and then you would use your butter knife and place the butter onto your plate. And having done that, tear your bread into a small mouth-sized piece.
Yeah.
Butter that piece of bread only,
Right.
and then pop it into your mouth, enjoy it, and when you're ready for another piece, tear off another mouth-sized piece.
Sure.
As opposed to lathering it with butter in one huge slice, picking up the whole slice, and then biting
Tearing it
into
off
the
with your
piece.
teeth.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Yeah. I learned that one later in life, but yeah, it is. Everything is a language that conveys who you are. So I think if we
So
care
let
about
me ask
that,
you
it's
a
important.
question, Natalie.
Sure.
So, you said you've learned that. What's
Yes.
your impression when you see someone just picking up the slice of bread in its entirety, lathering it with butter, using the common butter bowl and lathering it on, and then picking up the entire piece and eating it?
Well, my first response is empathy. That's where I used to be. But my second response is someone needs to help this person. I mean, if they care at all with, perception or whatever, it makes more sense too. I mean, there is some, you're not going to get butter over your mouth and because you're not chawing away at a big piece. But, I came from a very simple family on the East Coast, and not that all families are like mine, but we didn't dine out much. So I didn't get to those finer manners of dining out until I got into the wine and food world, even to properly holding your knife and fork. We were always sort of very casual. So as I became aware of it, though, I appreciated that. I didn't feel like it was a platform for snobbery, but I thought, I think it can just, you can make refinements in all kinds of ways. For me,
Of course.
I was a dancer for years, so it's refining your technique over and over so that you have a better performance. And again, not that dinner's performance, but I think there is an art of enjoying that can be elevated with some of these etiquette tips.
I think that's a great word, elevate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely. Well, speaking of elevating, why don't we taste some wine? Because I know
Sure.
that you have a couple bottles there, as do I. So I would be very curious as to which wines you've chosen and why. And let's give
Okay.
them a taste.
Sure. Well, my first wine that I have, it's a white wine,
Okay.
and it's from Vinascenti Vineyards here in BC.
Ah,
It's a local wine, and
Okay.
so I decided I'd choose a New World wine, and
Terrific.
it is a blend of Riesling and Gewürztraminer,
okay.
which I find interesting because Gewürztraminer is the lowest acidity in white wines, and Riesling is the highest.
Huh.
And one is and both come from the sort of floral base,
Yes.
so it's very aromatic, and the name itself, alla familia, to family, I find very intriguing, welcoming, and inviting.
Oh, that's
so
terrific. And how does it taste? If you want to
sure,
give us your
yeah. So
thoughts on how it tastes.
yeah.
In the meantime, I'll pour mine
So
for
I
sound
normally
effects.
I like to give the swirling 8 times. And
Why is that?
And I do it. Well, I do it 8 times because it's 8 is for Asians, certainly Chinese, it's a superstitious number. It's an auspicious number.
Okay.
It means it rhymes with growth. So I like to give it 8 times. It gives it enough time, and it's a very welcoming number. 8.
I like
so
that.
so that's what I like to do.
Well, then you certainly, as they say, volatilize the esters in the wine. You do want to get the wine moving to smell it for sure.
Yeah.
Get the aromas up in the glass.
Yeah.
So
When I'm doing tasting, I like to use these ISO glasses
okay.
because they're very versatile, and I find the bulb is bigger here, and at the rim it's narrower, so it captures the aromas. So
Sure.
I'm getting crisp citric, green apple, lime, hint of white flowers. It's quite a young vintage. Let's
Okay.
give it a taste.
Sure.
Definitely has those floral, lychee, and I'm even getting it on the palate. Good acidity, not as searing as a pure Riesling,
Right.
but not as dull as Gewürz.
Hmm.
A lot of acidity coming out, which is good when you're pairing with food, as you know.
Absolutely. And the thing about Gewürztraminer, I mean, Gewürz means spice, and
Yes.
a lot of people default to saying, okay, that's the perfect pairing with spicy food. Now, this might be an exception because you do have the Riesling offering acidity, but do you think that is a classic or a good match, Gewürztraminer and spicy food, or is
I think
something
it's a difficult match.
Yeah, I
I
think so.
On a personal note, I find that Gewürztraminer, because of the lack of acidity,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the Gewürz it's German for spicy,
Yes.
and Traminer is the village where this grape originated from in Italy, northeast.
Right.
Traminer, so Gewürztraminer. But because of the lack of acidity, I find it's a rather difficult wine to pair. I find
Right.
if you are going to pair food with Gewürz, your food should be somewhat a little bit more acidic. So if you're going
Okay.
to have fish and chips, add a lot of lemon to your fish.
Okay.
You might get more of a balance. But that's why this Riesling, as you mentioned, with the Gewürz, it allows you to have that balance of that spiciness. But I would tend to go more for Riesling
Yes.
for spicy foods.
Sure.
And perhaps a little bit off dry, just to counter the spiciness.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe around, I would say even at 13, it's a little too dry for spicy food. Certainly if you use like Sichuan peppers, Indian food, it's quite different, but certainly Thai. I would say, I'm sure you've had many different wines, but I'd say anywhere between 11.5 to 12.5, more in between 12 to 12.5 alcohol by volume.
Okay.
You give that off dry.
Sure.
That would be what I would recommend.
Absolutely. That sounds terrific. And I'll just show you the one I've been sipping on as well, which is Casaba from Ontario and a Sauvignon Blanc, but I find it very floral. And I should just note for those who are listening that I'll put links to these wines in the show notes in case you're interested in finding them. But it's a nice light wine that has sort of lime blossom, more floral than I expect from a Sauvignon Blanc, which usually for me is herbal, classic New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. But I quite like this one.
Well, I'd like to try it one day.
Yes, absolutely, and yours. What is the other wine you have with you there?
Well, on the red wine, I've chosen Boccale. It's a Boccale, and this is a Rosso, right? And
so from Italy?
So it's from Italy. It's from a region called Montefalco.
Okay.
And Montefalco is the center of the grape. As you can see, I'll show you here. So you see it's sort of like shaped like a little container, because in Italy, the word sort of boccale is container. So during the harvest time, in ancient times, and even today, people within the village can go to the winery or go to the olive farm, and they will take their little container, and it'll get filled up, and then they'll be charged accordingly. And that is what they call the boccale, the sort of mouth of it. But what's interesting is this particular bottle that I chose, it's from the Old World, from Italy, from a region called Umbria, and Umbria is the only landlocked province in Italy, right? And Montefalco is the center of the grape called Sagrantino. Now, Sagrantino is the most tannic grape. It's not Cabernet Sauvignon, it's not Nebbiolo, it's Sagrantino. And if you have a pure Sagrantino bottle, it will last you easily 25, 30 years plus.
Wow.
And in certain parts of Italy, from certain producers, a Sagrantino wine, a wine made from this grape, is what they call the 3-generational wine. Because you buy it not for you to drink, because it would be too tannic, nor for your children, but for your grandchildren.
Wow, that's
and
great.
This one, this Rosso, has Cabernet Sauvignon blend, and being from Italy, you've got to have Sangiovese.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so it's got Sangiovese, Sagrantino, and Cabernet Sauvignon. So,
sounds wonderful. Look forward to hearing what you think. So it has all those, Yes. I'm going to pour my second wine, which is actually from BC. While you're sipping on that one, I'll just show the camera, but also for those who are listening, Vanessa Vineyards, which is the V series, and it's very floral wine as well. But let's go back to you, Dr. Lee, after you finish sipping there.
I have indeed. It's on the notes, this is to 2017.
Okay.
So
still youthful.
It's still youthful. Definitely, I'm getting some dark fruit and red fruits on the nose. I'm even getting a little bit of that classic Sangiovese, that sort of touch of herbal spice.
Mm-hmm.
And on the mouthfeel, it's medium. But what's interesting is the tannins are still quite grippy. So you've got that Sagrantino, you've got the Cabernet Sauvignon, and the Sangiovese sort of mellows it out, just a hint of that licorice.
Right. And would
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh,
no,
sorry, go ahead.
No.
Our first time. Would you decant this?
I would, actually.
Okay.
Even though it's a blend and it's had 6 years,
Okay.
I think decanting this would make it more appealing. Yeah, but this would go well with any roasted pork, a steak. The specific way that the Italians make it. Very versatile. So it's an old world wine. It has some very classic grape varietals, and I've had the great fortune of visiting this particular winery, and the owner of this winery used to be the ex-mayor of Montefalco.
Ah, okay.
So, his name is Valentino Valentini, exceptional gentleman, and I was held a great deal of respect for him because during his tenure as the mayor of Montefalco, he was also responsible for securing funds to leave a lasting legacy in the town and area of Montefalco of a museum, which visitors there today will be able to see. So you're not only getting the culture, the very unique grape, but the history is now for generations to come.
Wonderful.
And I think that's what wine is also part of. It's the history and etiquette.
Absolutely. It's all wrapped in there. And would either of these wines pair well with truffles or caviar? You have specialty courses on both of those delicacies. And if not, what would you pair, say, with truffles? We're talking the fungi kind, not the chocolate kind, and caviar.
I think this would go well after you've. They've got the Rosso. If it was this particular glass, I would say yes. It would go with the truffles and like a beef carpaccio, with slithers of truffles coming out. If you were to take the pure 100% Sagrantino, my sense is it might be overwhelmed.
Sure.
The taste of the truffles and the carpaccio. I wouldn't go for a full 100% there.
Right.
So certainly in that sense, this red. I think the white. I think that alla familia will go with the truffles, and that would be a good pairing. In terms of the beef carpaccio and truffles, I would like to go for a good Burgundy or a Oregon Pinot, or even a Central Otago in New Zealand.
Right.
I think they would match well, and we've got some great wines in Canada as well.
Sure, absolutely. And what would you pair with caviar?
Caviar? Well, I would say champagne.
Oh, yes.
Would be one. Depends which champagne, of course.
Which one would you pick?
Well, I recently was having I gave a presentation, and the one that I chose was a Billecot Samon champagne, which just paired superbly. It was like a supermodel walking down the ramp, and just the clothing was elegantly swaying with each stride, and that's how it felt when you were tasting the Beluga. So as you know, you've got Ceruga, Ocetra, and Beluga, and each one has a different taste field. They're very unique. It's like a grape.
Right.
So the size, the shape, the flavor, but I was matching the Beluga with the Billecot Samon. It was
such
sort
a classic
of rosé.
champagne. Yes.
Yep.
So beautiful.
So,
the rosé, yes.
Yeah. So would this alla familia work with it? I think there's enough acidity, but perhaps you would want to go. It could, but I think it would match more with the Ocetra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The red, no, I would stay away.
Yes.
And of course, there are those that enjoy caviar with straight vodka.
Yes, that's true. And what is it in caviar and perhaps other seafood dishes? Is it the iodine fighting with the tannin in red wine? Is that why they clash?
Yeah, in part of my studies, certainly when you're dealing with seashells,
Yes.
any seafood with shells,
Yes.
there is that chemical reaction of the tannins
Right.
with the shell, which gives you that metallic taste in your
Right.
mouth.
Right.
It's a little bit like for those who may have tried zipper clone, that sleeping tablet, which some people like to take when they're going on long haul trips. When you
Okay.
wake up in the morning with that, you have that metallic taste,
Huh.
and it's that's why red wines don't go well with shellfish,
Hmm.
and it's not something that I would recommend with
Okay.
caviar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Such a vast education and so many great tips. I can't believe how quickly this time has gone, Dr. Lee. So I want to get to a couple of questions before we round up. There's just so much I would like to ask you.
Yeah. Well,
So
just
if you,
before we move on, I just want to
yes,
share with
please.
you. Our caviar, so we have caviar truffles,
Yeah,
cigar courses, and they've proved immensely popular.
I'll bet.
We have some world-class champagne and caviar participants and
Huh.
guest speakers, and they've taken all our courses. And our courses have been taken from as far away as Mendoza, Santiago, in South America, to Singapore, to Hong
Wow.
Kong, and all across the United States and Europe. So it's all online.
Oh,
So
that's
sure.
fantastic. Yeah. Oh, and that specialization, I mean, it's just who doesn't want to dive into caviar and truffles and champagne?
Well, I'll just share a quick story with you.
Sure.
Um, One of our fans wrote, they sort of sent on social media, sent a message. They said, "Thank you very much. Whenever I traveled on Emirates first class and they would give me the caviar, I wouldn't know how to eat it. So I would slide the door so they wouldn't see me how I ate it. But now, after taking your course and watching your videos, I feel much more confident. And
Oh,
that
that's
warms
wonderful.
my soul
Yes.
because part of what you and I do is to share our experience, educate, and in turn, we are equally. We feel by the comments that come back, it's reciprocated. We
Yes.
learn as well. Our base is broadened. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And to
So
deepen someone's pleasure because now they have confidence, whether it's to experiment or not to close the door when they're eating caviar, to simply
yeah,
enjoy it. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
They'll have to take your course to find out how to eat caviar correctly. um, so is there anyone in the world that you would love to share a bottle with, living or dead? Who would that be and why? And more importantly, or just as importantly, which bottle would that be?
Ah, well, it would be. I've always had the deepest respect for philosophers, as opposed to a singular person. It might be Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius,
Hmm.
maybe Machiavelli and Confucius all put together.
Wow.
Because I think you have this vast reservoir of highly intellectual individuals whose works and writings have permeated through the centuries and millennia.
Yes,
And yet today, we are still affected by them.
that's true. That's true. Their legacy
So,
remains.
yeah.
Hmm.
And in what wines? I
Yes.
think, the Romans would drink wine with their food, although somewhat diluted. The Greeks would have their wines after their meal. That's why it's called symposium. And,
Huh.
they would go and lounge out. So it'd have, and then I think Confucius would be a little bit more circumspect, and he might have more of a sweeter palate. So Machiavelli, I think it would depend on what the company and the food they had. So given, let's say, it was some meats, perhaps some duck. I think they all ate duck anyway. A Pinot Noir,
Huh.
I think would go well Although Aristotle, he might go for his lamb. So I think one should have a variety, maybe two, a heavier red and a lighter red.
Well, then they could debate which pairing goes well and have some sort of dialectic and come to a conclusion. But I think you would have to remind Machiavelli not to pour his own wine. He would think that's expedient, but you would say, no, that's not how it's done, Machiavelli.
That's true. That's true. The prince.
Yes, exactly. All right. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to go over? I'm going to ask you for your website and your socials and all that sort of thing, but is there something else you wanted to mention as we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity, Natalie.
Sure.
It's been a real pleasure being on your show.
Thank you.
And I do follow it and I listen with great interest. I would like to share to our viewers and listeners that you may believe that what you do is not important, but it is. It's very important, and it contributes to the fabric of our society, singularly and also collectively. If you can just be aware that we are living in a world with many different generations and different viewpoints and how they grew up, and if you can consider just 2 points: what situation are you in, and what is the environment? So as a quick example, you could be in a particular country where you're in the city. That's your situation, and you are meeting more refined, sophisticated individuals, because that's the environment. You're in a business meeting. Now, you could have the same situation, but in a rural setting. The environment is quite different, but you're in the same country. So just remember what situation and what environment and what you do is very important, and show tolerance towards one another.
Lovely. What a great gift of parting advice. I love that. Thank you. I too have enjoyed this, Dr. Lee. Where can we find you online?
Well, online, our website is apwazi.com, and APWAZI stands for Asia Pacific Wine and Spirit Institute. That's an acronym, apwasi.com. And on the social media platforms, you'll find us under APWAZI Wine. And on YouTube, it'll be APWAZI Channel.
Okay. And we'll put links to all of that in the show notes. And then your book, is it available yet for pre-order, or will that come later in the year?
It is available for pre-order, and I'm delighted to say that it is racing up the charts to within the top 100 on the Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, so wow. That's terrific.
It's only available in hard copy. The North America release is, I'm told, on September, and the global release is in October, but you can buy it right now. And it covers aspects within the book of what you can do to make yourself more approachable. What are the key elements that you need to consider? And then there's sectors on how to meet, how to greet, the wining aspect, the dining aspect, and of course the business arena that you'll be in, and how to deal with the different situations. You certainly will walk away more confident. So,
yes. It sounds wonderful. And is it Mastering the Art of Manners?
Yes, Mastering the Art of Manners.
By Dr. Clinton Lee.
Yes, from Page Street Publishing, and my distributors are Macmillan.
Oh, there you go. Great distributor. That's great. Well, congratulations on the launch of that and its imminent success and already climbing the charts. That's terrific. And we'll link to that too in the show notes, Dr. Lee.
It's a real pleasure having been on your show, Natalie, and thank you very much for that.
Well, I raise my glass to you, but if we do what you suggested, both of our glasses are going to be out of the frame soon. But thank you so much, Dr. Lee. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed our chat.
It's been an immense pleasure, and your vibrant personality is not only bubbly but warm, and thank you for all the sincerity.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lee. That's wonderful. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.